Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we've got a lot to get to. We are going to be bouncing around a little bit, and I'm going to explain sort of how that's going to be working in the foreseeable future. But first and foremost, I am still setting up, so I'm sort of just skidding in here. We're opening up Rumble, we're opening up Locals, and we're giving shout outs to everybody who is piling in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. But it looks like things are working now, and Lean is saying, Lean gave us a countdown. Shout out to Naywell, Shane Sousa, Talbert's mom is here. Holy F, my S stinks is here. And the point, my friends, is we are now in business. So let's see what is on the docket for the day. As usual, let's go over to our mind map. Here we've got it, and you can see there's a lot of activity, and they're not all in sync. Sometimes what we do is we try to sort of stay on theme, go through and just sort of stay on one topic. Not going to be happening today. And we're not in trial mode. Trial mode, we can really sort of squeeze in a whole show about Bannon or Sussman or whatever's going on. But now things are sort of slowing down a little bit. And so we're going to bounce around. Now, the good news is there's going to be a little bit of an additional production quality here on the channel. I've been telling you that Marvin and I have been working on getting in sync and making sort of our content better. And so what we're going to do is actually clip out each one of these segments and edit them, synthesize them down into a 20-30 minute sort of follow-up, and then post those also, right? So almost like it's a clip really of the live stream, but most people don't watch the whole live stream. And so we're going to be doing that for each one of these segments moving forward. So you'll see that. Hopefully you appreciate that, or hopefully it's not too annoying, right? It's not too many clips, but we'll try it. If you hate it, let me know and then we'll stop it. So but the point is, here's what we're getting to today, my friends. First and foremost, we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Donald Trump, of course, the subject of a potential criminal probe. There was an interview that we were kind of keeping our ears peeled about yesterday between Donald Trump and Lester Holt. I'm sorry, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is this guy right here. Between Lester Holt and Merrick Garland about Donald Trump and really about whether they're going to be indicting him. And we're going to follow up on that because there's a lot of things left over to see and unpack here. Merrick Garland, we had the one clip from yesterday, but there's another one where he's sharing his personal experience about what took place on January 6th. And simultaneously to his interview, there was also this drop from the Washington Post where they're confirming for us. They're saying, yeah, look, there is, in fact, a criminal probe investigating the former president. And if you look at this subtitle, it tells us they have even seized phone records of top aides. And so that's a pretty big, that's a pretty big deal if there's actually a criminal prosecution going on with an inquiry, investigations. What are they subpoenaing? Do they have moles undercover, confidential informants there? Who knows? So it could be a big, like they talk about unprecedented all the time. This is literally unprecedented. There's never happened criminal charges for a former president. So maybe this is the first time, but we'll see what's going on. Adam Schiff, Pencilly of the Pencils, was out, and he told us, well, he has an opinion he's going to share with us. Look at this guy. He is very excited about a potential Donald Trump prosecution, and so we'll spend some time listening to him. There's this woman, her name is Alyssa Farah, I think is how we say her name, and she was on The View. And on The View, she's actually sort of an ex-Trumper. She was a former Trump White House comms person. And they brought her over to The View and they said, hey, what's your take on all of this? Is Donald Trump going to announce that he's running before this indictment comes out? Or is the indictment going to come first? Or who's going first? And this could be a big, I think, strategic move. And they're really sort of playing, a game of chicken here to some degree. Who's going to go first? And we're going to listen to Miss Alyssa. And she's saying that she thinks that Garland is hinting towards a prosecution. Now, on our morning walk and talk, we talked about this strategy that is being proffered by the Democrats, a very weird one, where they're actually boosting pro-Trump Republicans, people who are sort of the truthier of the GOP candidates in all of these various elections that are coming up very soon. The DCC, the Democratic Congressional Committee, they're supporting sort of the Trump Republicans, and that could really backfire. A lot of the Democrats are very angry about this, David Axelrod and many of those people. And so we'll take a look at that story also over from Politico. And then that's really going to get most of the Trump and the J6 stuff out of the way early on in the program. And then we're going to go international, my friends. As you can see, we're talking about a Russian prisoner exchange today. And not a really ideal situation to be having to negotiate with your foreign adversaries for prisoners and all that. Not ideal, right? And there's been a woman by the name of Brittney Griner, an American basketball player who has been held captive in Russian prison for quite some time. Here's a photograph of her reaching through the jail cell, right, saying, hi, I don't like the look of this. I don't like the scene of this at all. I don't like Americans of any shape, size, stripe, variety being held in custody by foreign governments. I don't like it. And this is some stupid, ridiculous charge about marijuana and, whatever. It's a bogus thing. She's a political hostage, of course. And our unfortunate, useless government is so feckless that they have really no leverage. There's nothing to bargain with at all. But they are trying to get her back. Fortunately, they're trying to do something useful here to get an American citizen back. And I don't know what the story is on why she was over there or whatever, but, they are trying to get her back. But the big question, of course, is what are they doing to get her back? Because this guy seems like he's about to go free. His name is Viktor Bout, and his nickname is the Master of Disaster. What is it? It's something or other. It's the Master of something. It's really, it's a good one. I forgot it. I have it in the notes later on. Well, what's his name? Oh, here it is. The Merchant of Death. Oh, yeah, there it is. The Merchant of Death. How could I forget that one? So we're, they're going to exchange Brittney Griner, American basketball player, probably, has a mean 3-pointer, I don't know, for the Merchant of Death, going back over to Russia. And, not a really good, if you talk about trades, right? Not a really ideal trade, like a basketball player trade, but this is an American citizen. So, I'm not saying she shouldn't come home. Like, I want her home badly. But the point of this story is that the Biden DOJ is advising against this. The Washington Post or whoever is reporting, as we're going to get into, they're saying, we shouldn't do this. And Biden is overriding that, right? They're basically overriding that and saying, well, that's too bad. The Merchant of Death needs to go free. And so we're going to check in with Anthony Blinken, and also reporters asking him about this. Is this going to be happening in the coming days, or what's going on here? And so that's going to be our segment going international. And then we've got some legal heavy lifting, I've been asking for feedback on our morning walk and talks for the type of content that you want to see, and the type of stuff you like and the type of stuff you dislike. And it's sort of this, it's an organic thing that we have here in the form of these live streams and the conversation that we continue to have. And many of you have said that, yeah, you like some of the shorter segments and you like the shorter bits because you can't stay for 2 hours or an hour and a half on a live stream. So we're going to do that. And also that you really sort of like some of the constitutional issues and some of the Supreme Court stuff and some of the state battles, the legal battles that are taking place, not necessarily criminal law, but legal battles. And so we've got a segment here on that one. And I'm calling this segment the Transgender Lunch Money Lawsuit. I think that's pretty catchy, right? It's got nice alliteration to it. The Transgender Lunch Money Lawsuit. Because that's kind of what it is. As we're going to see, Tennessee and 22 other states are suing the Biden administration, here in this case, the Department of Agriculture, over new impositions from the Biden administration saying you have to impose these gender identity policies or these orientation policies. And we've talked a lot about this here on this channel, about the power of the purse and how the federal government will often incentivize states to do certain things like raise your speed limit or raise your drinking age. If you want that Department of Transportation money, you'll do what we say on your highways. And, that sort of happens all over the place. So we are going to go through this today. Back in June, 23 states sent a letter over to the Biden administration saying, you can't tell us what to do in our schools. You can't impose these gender identity executive requirements on us. This is nonsense. And then when the Biden administration didn't respond, guess what happened? They filed a lawsuit. And that lawsuit hit the docket yesterday on July 26. It is from A.G. Slatery. He's out of Tennessee. 22 states. They are suing Biden because Biden is now threatening, look how they say it, threatening to withhold nutrition assistance for schools. Withholding of nutrition assistance. That's their lunch money. That's lunch money, nutrition assistance. Okay, the Biden administration is going into these schools and he's saying, you do what we say. on gender identity, or we're going to flip you upside down and shake out all of your lunch money and we're going to take it. They're that bully that everybody hated growing up. So, all right, so we're going to get to that and more. And then, of course, we're going to go through the complaint. It's a big whopper of a complaint. And so it's about 100 and something pages. Look at this thing, 137 pages. Ugh. Okay, well, we're obviously not going to go through the whole thing, but look at this. It's going to include a lot of you, right? You may not be one of the 23 states who are involved, but Kentucky, Louisiana, shout out, Missouri, Ohio, Oklahoma. We've got South Carolina. And is there North Carolina? I don't know if there's North Carolina on here, which is just, I don't know what that says about North Carolina, but yeah, or South Dakota's on here. Yeah, so West Virginia's on here, Georgia, and Arizona, shout out, we're all on the list, suing the Biden people for interfering with our schools. And so we'll get to that. Now, as you can see, there is a lot that we are going to be diving through today. And if you want to be a part of the program, the place to do that is by joining our community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see there's a web address right here. And if you go there, you're going to see people chatting away. Jason on Blast. We have Paula MK, JC the Music Man, TOS Forever. They're chatting. And Caddy Did Too is here. Caddy Did Too is I think new. Zach Nichols, shout out. And welcome Paula MK and many others. Now, we've got an awesome community there. We do morning walk and talks where the conversation carries on. And I've got even more ideas. I spent about an hour today solving a big problem that we've had on Locals, which is me not being able to share audio. And I think I have that problem licked with a hardware solution. I was able to cross the streams. And so for those of you on Locals, I think that we're going to be able to do, remember we used to do those show prep shows, but I couldn't share audio. I think we can do show prep shows, but I can share audio now, which is like really fun. So the point is, I'm very excited about what's coming down the pike. Also, if you join on YouTube, you get some of those same perks. If you are in Arizona or know anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, our law firm can help. Any criminal charges anywhere in the state of Arizona, that's what we do. We have a mission to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. And we'd appreciate it if you think of us for your referrals. 480-787-0394. We offer free case evaluations, and we're very passionate about the work that we do. And shout outs to Man vs. Yard, Alan WS, Larry One, Cheryl Pemberton. They were over on Rumble. Cheryl Pemberton, Ronnie Cole, Curtis Bartle's over on YouTube. Shout out to Curtis Bartle. And Lean is modding down the fort for us. And so, my friends, now it is time to get into the program and actually into the content. So let's get started, shall we, with Donald Trump and the criminal probe. Donald Trump might be facing a criminal probe. As we know, the DOJ has been sort of circling around this issue for quite some time. And now there's new evidence from news sources that it may be closer towards an indictment than we ever thought. As you can see, we are on our mind map, and here in this node, we've got several different bits that we're going to attend to today. First and foremost, the main story comes over from the Washington Post, and the Washington Post is reporting that there is an actual criminal probe well underway. And we've been following and covering the January 6th hearing for a long period of time. Basically, every single one of them we've touched on or talked about. The first three we covered in depth. But the big question is, what's going to come of those? Are they going to make a criminal referral? Yes or no? We don't know. And now Merrick Garland, the head of the DOJ, the Attorney General of the United States, he is communicating a little bit more about this. And the Washington Post is simultaneously reporting. They published this on July 26th. They tell us the Justice Department is investigating Trump's actions because they actually have a criminal probe. And it's not just like speculative. They actually have some concrete reports that they're examining Trump's conversations and they're examining phone records seized from Trump aides, right? So an actual political prosecution of political enemies. So Biden is a Democrat. He runs the executive branch as the president, and he is prosecuting through, I don't know what's going on here, whether there's warrants, whether there's wiretaps or what, but there's a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump, who may or may not be announcing and running and winning again the next presidency, the next election. We'll see. The Justice Department is investigating the president, prosecutors who are questioning witnesses before a grand jury, right? Prosecutors, not January 6th committee people. Department of Justice prosecutors. 4 people familiar with the matter are now reporting this over to the Washington Post. Now, most of these media entities are garbage, so just take it for what it's worth. But they're saying it's true, and there's 4 people there. Prosecutors, including 2 top aides to Vice President Mike Pence, have asked in recent days about conversations with Trump, his lawyers, people in his inner circle, and so on and so forth. Both spoke on condition of anonymity so that they don't get caught. Prosecutors have asked hours of detailed questions about meetings that Trump led in December and January 2021, his pressure campaign, according to them, to overturn the elections, and instructions that Trump gave to his lawyers about fake electors and so on. Some of the questions focused directly on the extent of Trump's involvement and so on. They talked about John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani, both of whom we've talked about. In addition, the Justice Department investigators that are leaked now through this source to the Washington Post, in April, they received phone records of key officials and aides in the Trump administration. Right. So this is beyond just Liz Cheney now, who is just rummaging through everybody's garbage. These are U.S. attorneys. These are U.S. prosecutors who are now trying to cobble together a case. Why? For an indictment. Now, I have long speculated that there was not going to be an indictment because it would be completely unprecedented and it would be something that would open a can of worms and I think really sort of awaken a sleeping giant to some degree. And I think it would be a political, constitutional, I think it would be sort of a mistake of epic proportions. And I think it would be so stupid that they wouldn't do it, but they might actually do it because they are that stupid. Now, they are thinking about it and they're actually forming this probe going after Trump and apparently Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. It's another indicator of how expansive the probe is. Washington Post and other news organizations have previously written that they are examining the conduct of Eastman, Giuliani, and others, and that has not been a surprise, okay? The idea that Bannon and Navarro and all of these other individuals, everybody else is fair game, right? That's obvious. That was always going to be obvious. But the president is a whole different ballgame, right? That's somebody who's sort of untouchable for criminal prosecution, and many people, I think, sort of gloss over this, right? There's a reason for that. The point is, we don't want people prosecuting political opponents in this country. We want to reserve that for the ballot box. We want to say, look, if somebody does something bad in office, okay, well, look, you can prosecute them. I mean, it's got to be like, overwhelmingly egregious. Otherwise, they're out of there in 4 years. And one of the mechanisms that prevents this from happening, prevents a criminal from governing, is the check that is called the power of the people. The people every so often get the opportunity to throw somebody out. And if they don't like that person, they'll throw them out. And if they think that they're an insurrectionist, they'll throw them out. And if they don't, then they won't throw them out. But the problem with this is that they know that most of the country doesn't think or is engaged in this conversation about this alleged insurrection. And so they have to tip the scales. They've got to take advantage of the current sort of environment to try to create this narrative that removes Trump from the field. That's the story over from the Washington Post. Now, that dropped very conveniently, you'll know, at about 6:58 p.m. Eastern time on July 26. And that was, I think, very nicely timed with Merrick Garland, who was also having a conversation over on NBC with Lester Holt. Lester Holt is this guy, and we played this clip of Merrick Garland yesterday. Of course, he's the attorney general, so he makes these decisions, and he's going to be the ultimate final arbiter of whether there is an indictment against Donald Trump, right? The decision's going to lie with him, or maybe Lisa Monaco, who I sort of suspect is really in charge of the office over there. But regardless, somebody at the DOJ is going to make a decision, and then they will decide whether to indict a former president. And everybody on the sidelines has been just as gleeful as can be. All the Democrats, all the media anchors, Jake Tapper, Liz Cheney, everybody just sort of, what's going to happen? Is he going to be indicted? Merrick Garland, what do you say about this?
To justice without fear or favor. We intend to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do. We don't pay any attention to other issues with respect to that.
So if Donald Trump were to become a candidate for president again, that would not change your schedule or how you move forward or don't move forward?
Say again.
Okay, so this is a very important question that Lester asked. And this is something, the media is now asking. You us here, we've been talking about this for months now. What happens if Donald Trump announces first and they indict him? Now they've indicted an actual candidate for president, right? Somebody who's already won and somebody who very likely could run again. This is not somebody like a Bernie Sanders, right? Who is just not going to win because it's just not going to happen. But sorry about that, everybody. But the problem is here, he could be an actual candidate, and he's got a huge swath of people in this country, whether you want to admit it or not, who are very animated and highly supportive of him. So what happens if he runs? He says, I'm in, and everybody's now animated. We're supporting him. He gets indicted. Holy moly. You know, I think even people on the fence will go, wait a minute, what? I think more people would be animated and agitated to support him than more people would be turned off by the indictment. I would guess. Speculative. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it's a very important question. Why is Lester asking about it? Because people are concerned that if Trump does announce that Mr. Garland is not going to then move forward, right? It's going to dissuade him from making the prosecution a real thing. So they're asking him, if he announces, I mean, if he says he's going to run, are you going to get scared and then like stop prosecuting him because he's announced now? What's going to happen? And he says, listen,
that we will hold accountable anyone who is criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next.
Okay, so he doesn't say anything about the timeliness. He's not saying, yes, we're going to get him before or after or whatever, but he's just saying, look, we're going to follow it wherever it leads. I don't care if he's announced or not announced, is really what he's saying, right? Nothing is going to deviate him from his decision, whether he runs or not. We have another clip from him. Now, he describes sort of his experience on January 6th. And we get a lot of these questions from people in the media. You know, they say, tell me about January 6th in your personal experience. And they say, keep it personal. Because I want to hear the emotion. I want to hear the impact and how this really felt to you. And, you know, some of this stuff has been laughed off a little bit. Like we listened to Jake Tapper talk to Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson was like, yeah, it was a weird day. Remember, Jake was like, it was a horrible tragedy. And Boris Johnson said, it was a little bit weird. Jake Tapper said it was more than weird. And Johnson said, well, you know, it was a pretty weird day. I'll say that. He said weird 3 times. But they want this sort of this agreement, this virtue signaling about how horrific this day was. And now that question is going to go to Merrick Garland. And honestly, he doesn't really throw out a bunch of emotional stuff. It's just kind of like, yeah, it was an important day.
Let's start off and talk about January 6th. We've just watched weeks of some pretty horrific testimony about what led up to January 6th and what happened that day. Just as an American, can you tell me what your impression was of what we heard?
It's an important part of democracy that every American recognizes the truth of what happened on January 6th and in the air.
I would love the truth.
Yes. I think that this is an important part that we not downgrade or suppress how important that day was. And I think that the hearings did an extremely good job of reminding us, and for people who didn't know in the first place, telling us how important that day was and what a risk it meant for our democracy.
What a risk it meant for our democracy, right? So, okay. You know, not a real like dripping statement. Some of the statements are dripping. Like Joe Biden said, it was the worst thing since the Civil War. You go, what? Are you nuts? So it wasn't like that, right? Not a ton of hyperbole, but enough there that you go, okay, what's he going to do, right? Is he going to indict him or not? And so those statements came out. We had back-to-back Washington Post, drop it. Garland, drop it. Trump criminal probe, we know, is well underway. The DOJ, through Merrick Garland, is now announcing they don't care if he announces or not. He's going to get indicted if the evidence will lead them there. And so now we have to take a look at the people who are gathering the evidence. Of course, we have Adam Schiff. Many people call him pencil neck because of the size of his neck. Other people call him watermelon head because of the size of his head. It's hard to make a decision on that. You be the decider. Here he is now, very gleeful about what Merrick Garland just said. Some of that activity from that interview, he's able to extrapolate the following.
I think the Attorney General today was saying all the right things, and I noticed a difference, at least I perceived a difference between what he'd been saying earlier about focusing on all those involved in the attack on January 6th, and now talking more broadly about the overall plot to overturn the election. So I would hope that if the department is truly following the evidence wherever it leads, it will recognize it has been leading to Donald J. Trump.
Okay, so he's like really encouraging him, follow the evidence where it leads. You're going to see that it leads to Donald J. Trump. And he's talking about that change, right? That Merrick Garland is saying, yes, we're going to follow the evidence. And, it doesn't matter if he announces or what. He's excited about it. Now, there was also another clip here from Alyssa Farah, who is a former comms person from the Trump White House. And I think, I have a couple of clips here from her. Yeah, former Trump White House communications director, Alyssa Farah. She's at Alyssa Farah on The View. And she says part of Trump's rationale is that if Trump announced, Merrick Garland can't take him on. I think the statement from Garland is to say that's not true, right? So she's sort of speculating, and she says something interesting, like she used to be in Trump's orbit. Here she is.
Listen, I think that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General's remarks were very significant, because what I've been hearing from Trump world, I do still talk to some people who are in that broader orbit, is that he's moving up his announcement for president for the future cycle.
Moving up his announcement for the future cycle, right? Something we've been talking about a lot. Is he going to announce sooner rather than later? And you also, right, it's not just the prosecution question. There's also a question about midterms. And some people are saying, well, what if he announces and he makes all the midterms about Trump and now there's not a big red wave? Well, maybe he takes credit for the losses or for a smaller red wave. Or other people are saying, what if he announces and there's a giant red wave and then he takes credit for all of it all? Or maybe it's because of him, right? Maybe he is the cause of a giant red wave or not, right? There's all this gamesmanship that's being played and speculated, and everybody's trying to really, I think a lot of these things, the reality doesn't matter. It's sort of who can come up with the better story. Trump's going to get out there and, I announced early and I'm responsible for the win. Or what happens, right? Another sort of contrarian view is what happens if Trump doesn't announce, there is a giant red wave, and you get all of the mainstream GOPers who come out and they say, see, the party doesn't need Trump anymore. We can win without him. He wasn't even involved in any of these elections and we still crushed the Democrats. Now it's time for Ron DeSantis or whatever the narrative will be. And so she's saying, right, she's in Trump communication, former Trump communications, and she's telling us that they're speculating about all of this, when to announce and when not, because it might deflate or take the air out of some of the prosecution if there is one, whatever this criminal probe ultimately shows.
To this August, if not September. And part of the rationale that they're quietly saying is if he's an announced candidate, Merrick Garland can't take him on. That goes against precedent. You can't. And I think the statement from Merrick Garland was precisely to say, that's not true. No one is above the law, whether you're an announced candidate or not. It was very intentional for him to say that.
Okay, so here they're all saying that's not true. You can go and indict a former president. All that is true. I think you can indict a former president. I think there's a distinction there about a sitting president, right? Whether you can indict a sitting president, because that sitting president is basically the chief executive officer of the country, right? The chief law enforcement officer. It is the chief executive. So if they are in charge of the Department of Justice, how do you prosecute a sitting president if they are the purveyor of justice, right? The executor of justice. And they've also got the pardon power, which sort of gives them the ability to sort of be outside of the law, right? It's a very precarious question that exists while you're president, but I don't think that there's been any hinting that you can't indict a former president. The question has been, why hasn't it happened? Well, of course, everybody knows. It's because it's a political explosive bomb that would happen. Gerald Ford, when he got in power after Richard Nixon, right, he could have let the floodgates go after him and go open and all over the place. He didn't. Pardon him. Just let's get this over with, because there's going to be another investigation when the other party takes power. So we're just going to clear it up. And that's sort of been the norm, because we don't want political prosecutions, because as Americans, we let the political process act as a check on that power. Now, in order to continue to be victorious in that political process, you got to win elections. And the Democrats are trying a very interesting and new strategy in order to try to gain an upper hand here. And House Democrats are very angry about this because it may result in pro-Trump Republicans winning. as they're now thinking about this probe, as the January 6th committee is communicating this stuff over to the DOJ, what happens if the Republicans take over and they're now the makeup of the J6 committee and they're not cooperating with the DOJ anymore, right? They have their own subpoenas and they're not providing evidence over to the U.S. Attorney's Office that they need in order to conduct their prosecutions. What happens? Politico reports, they tell us House Democrats berate a campaign arm of the Democrats over a very dangerous GOP primary scheme. The DCC, the Democratic Congressional Something Committee, is airing ads boosting pro-Trump Republicans in primaries against an incumbent who voted for impeachment. This guy, his name is Meyer. He's one of the few GOP lawmakers who voted to hold Trump accountable over his false claims about the 2020 election. But he's in a blue-leaning state. And he's also a Democratic target this fall. Now, what you can see here is a growing number of House Democrats are seething at their own campaign arm for meddling in a GOP primary to promote pro-Trump election conspiracy theorists after months of warnings that such candidates were a threat to democracy. We have public statements, private chats, different complaints going directly over to the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Democratic members are aghast that the committee is spending nearly $500,000 buckaroos to air ads boosting Donald Trump-endorsed John Gibbs over Rep. Peter Meyer, who voted to impeach Trump last year. Meyer is one of a few GOP members who did, in fact, vote to hold him accountable, they write. His blue-leaning seat is also a top Democratic target. Democrats like Murphy say there's a strategy that could backfire. They are voting, right? They are funneling money to his primary opponents because they think that if the primary opponent wins, he's going to be easier to beat in the general election. Murphy says many of us are facing death threats over our efforts to tell the truth about J6, and to have people boosting candidates telling people other lies is very dangerous and mind-blowing. And they're not happy about it. Now, I saw a bunch of clips from David Axelrod, who's a former Obama campaign advisor, and others who are screaming about this. The DCC decision to spend $425,000 running an ad that supports a Republican escalates the party's involvement. It was funded by the lawmakers' own membership dues. Do you see what's happening? The Democrats are paying for ads for Republican primary people, because they think that they're going to be easier to beat if they win the primary, that they'll be easier to beat in the general election. So Democrats are like, wait a minute, why are you spending money on Republicans? That's Democrat money. Very interesting times. Now, that is the summation of the Trump criminal probe. We, of course, will see if anything comes of it. Merrick Garland, the J6 committee, and many of the Democrats are still, I think, engaged in a lot of wishful thinking on this topic. They're very excited about a prospective Trump indictment. Whether that comes to fruition, we will see, and we'll continue to follow the Trump criminal probe story, of course. And so that is that segment, my friends. Let's take a look at what else we have coming up here. I see Lean is here, Live Mad, Scott McClish. Shout outs over on YouTube. Texas Ditch Doctor is here on Locals, and on Rumble, Man versus Yard. Everybody's in the house. All right, and next up, what's coming up? We've got, oh yeah, the Russian prisoner exchange is here. And this is a story, you know, we haven't gone international in a while, but this is an interesting one. A Russian prisoner exchange may well be underway. American basketball player Brittney Griner is somebody who is potentially going home. She's been in Russian jails for quite some time. And we're going to take a look at what this prisoner exchange looks like here today in this video. We've got here, Viktor Bout is an individual known as the Merchant of Death, and he is the person who may be exchanged for Brittney Griner, who is this woman here who's been in Russian custody for some time. In addition to this guy, his name is Paul Whelan, and he, I think, was a former spy intelligence agent who has been in Russian custody for quite a period of time. But this exchange is taking place, and CNN is the entity that actually broke the news. It's an exclusive that they reported. On Wednesday, they said the Biden administration is now offering convicted Russian arms dealers in exchange for these two individuals. You see the photographs of them here. So Russian exchange of arms dealer Viktor Bout for American basketball player Brittney Griner and intelligence agent Paul Whelan. Here's the story. After months of internal debate, Biden people has offered to exchange Viktor Bout. Now, this guy is really serious business. He's a convicted Russian arms trafficker. He's serving 25-year U.S. prison sentence. Now, I actually have a little bit more on him over from Wikipedia, so we're going to take a look at him in a minute. But first, let's learn more about Paul Whelan. He is one of the Americans who is suspected to be coming home. You see here, born 1970, Irish, British, and Canadian, arrested in Russia back on December 28, 2018, accused of spying. Right, so he's been in custody for some time. He got a 16-year prison sentence back on June 2020. Described as a corporate security director, received a bad conduct discharge, and might be going to a prison labor camp. He was a police officer in Michigan. And let's see, he was an IT manager, staffing company up until 2003, joined the Marines in 1994, was there for a long time. Operation Iraqi Freedom. He got a bad conduct discharge after a court martial for larceny, something like that. And then says he was a part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was arrested in Russia as the director of global security for a company called Borg Warner. His work says that he's got contacts with law enforcement and others. Traveled to Russia many times in 2006, maintained an intermittent presence, knows Russian language. He supported Donald Trump, and after Trump's victory, he posted in Russian. He said in a deposition in 2013, he's got a bachelor's degree, criminal justice. His arrest in Russia, arrested in the Moscow area. The Russian FSB confirmed his arrest, attended the wedding of a former Marine over there, and had $80,000 in cash temporarily confiscated. They also took his U.S. passport, apprehended in a hotel room where there was a list of all employees. He had a USB drive containing a list of all the employees at a classified security agency. So, you know, moving some data around. BBC cited family members. He said he knew agents. Former CIA officers have stated that the CIA would not recruit an officer with his record. So everybody's disavowing him. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Russia will not arrest innocent people simply to exchange them. Okay. John Huntsman, ambassador to Russia, was involved. Mike Pompeo said, "We've made clear to the Russians our expectation that we will learn more about the charges, come to understand he's been accused of, and that if detention is not appropriate, we're going to demand return." Okay, so that's enough about him. Now, 16 years in a Russian prison, so we know who that is. That's Paul Whelan. He's the subject of this exchange. We also have Brittney Griner, and if you're not familiar with her, right, this story has been going on for some time. She's an American basketball player. She is the only NCAA basketball player to both score 2,000 points and block 500 shots. Named the nation #1 high school basketball player by Rivals.com. Best female athlete. Oh, 2000 Phoenix Mercury. That's here at Arizona. Shout out. She's one of 11 women to receive a gold medal championship in 2022 in February, right? So just earlier this year, she was detained by the Russians after cartridges containing hashish oil were found in her luggage. Ugh! Those little cartridges, huh? She had been entering Russia to play with the Russian premier WNBA offseason. Her trial began on July 1. She pled guilty to the charges. All right, so she's been in custody for quite some time. So we sort of know who we're dealing with. We've got Paul and Brittney. Now, we're going to take a look at what this exchange is about. But first, here's an interesting little clip of some of the conditions. And this came over from Newsmax. I'm not really,
I want to take you back.
Not really interested in the Newsmax commentary, but I am interested in this clip here so you can sort of see what the Russians are doing. You know, obviously I practice criminal law. I've spent a lot of time in and out of jails and prisons, and I know federal prisons, local jails, big town, federal, you know, small town. All here we've got a Russian example. You can see this on the screen, and it looks like it's interesting. And I'm looking at the Russian, you know, outfits and the hats that they've got on. It's just interesting to see this. So it almost looks like, yeah, so reaching hands through, shaking hands, Brittney, with people. I don't know if they're fans or just spectators or maybe people she knows or what's going on. But it's interesting, right? It's more secure than what you'll see in most traditional places in the United States. She's holding up a picture of maybe her family. And she's in Moscow court for their 6th hearing, right? So she's there, and in most U.S. facilities, you'll bring a whole group of people in chains, right? In their fatigues, in their prison outfits, not fatigues, in their you understand what I'm saying. They bring them in and they put them behind a panel. Sometimes it'll actually be in the jury box in many of these courtrooms, but they're not like in a jail cell, like a fully enclosed jail cell here. So, it's sort of interesting to see how the Russians do it. It's a little bit more dramatic, I'll say. And that's probably for effect. Now, while she's there, they talked about this court proceeding and what this court hearing looks like. And this audio is really bad, but apparently they got a phone call from her. She's out of Kimiki, Russia. And she's actually telling us what that court proceeding was like, how it all unfolded. Here's what it sounds like.
The translations were not very good. I remember one time him receiving a stack of papers that he was supposed to translate to me, and he looked at them for a brief moment, and the exact words were, basically, you're guilty.
Okay, so really hard to hear that audio. I'll read it for you. It says she got the court proceeding, right? She's there. She's got a lawyer, some Russian, whoever. Says translations were not very good. I remember one time seeing a stack of papers that he was supposed to transfer to me, and he looked at them for a brief moment, and his exact words were basically, "You're guilty." So that's a nice lawyer right there for you, right? A Russian defense lawyer, public defender, a Russian public defender walks in. He's like, okay, let's make this very quick. I've done my analysis on your case. Here's my report. You're guilty. Sign here. She goes, okay, I guess that's the best I'm going to get on this thing. So not a lot of due process over there, it sounds like. And, hashish oil and so on and so forth. And so the Biden people, they really want to bring her home. And I want her home too. As I said, I want all Americans home. I don't want foreign governments using Americans as political pawns anywhere, whether it's Paul or anybody, right? It's ridiculous. Now, we are going to learn about Viktor Bout. But I think the one little segment that I forgot to mention here on this story over from CNN said that sources told CNN the plan is to trade Bout for Whelan and Griner, and that it received the backing of President Joe Biden after being discussion since earlier this year. Biden's support for the swap overrides opposition from the Department of Justice, which is generally against prisoner trades. Right, so Biden is overriding his DOJ. Biden does this a lot. He overrides people. Overrides his Afghanistan advisors. He overrides basically every person who has good judgment around him. He says, I'm not going to do that. And then he does the opposite. So here, Biden's support for the swap overrides opposition from the Department of Justice, which opposes prisoner trades. So he's going to go against the grain. And now Anthony Blinken is out. Now, here's what it looks like. This is the person that America is releasing, Viktor Bout, over from Wikipedia. Viktor is a Russian arms dealer born back in 1967. He's an entrepreneur, former Soviet military translator, used multiple air transport companies to smuggle weapons since the collapse of the Soviet Union. During the 90s and early 2000s, he was involved in all sorts of arms deals. And they said he was nicknamed so much so that he was nicknamed the Merchant of Death and the Sanctions Buster because he had wide-reaching operations, extensive clientele, and a willingness to bypass embargoes. He got arrested in Thailand 2008 in operations for terrorism charges, got extradited to the United States. He was accused of intending to smuggle arms for the FARC in Colombia, denied the charges, went to federal court, indicted and convicted on conspiracy to kill U.S. citizens, delivery of anti-aircraft missiles, and providing aid to a terrorist organization. Oh, sounds like a nice fella. 25 years imprisonment. And he's been held at a federal penitentiary ever since. So they're going to be releasing him in exchange for Brittney and Paul. Okay. Not ideal, but all right. And as I said, I don't know what you do in a situation like this. I think it's really problematic when your country is in such a precarious position that you really have very little leverage to do much of anything. So you have to give up somebody like Viktor in order to get somebody back like Brittney. Now, this has been debated for some time, and of course, Biden is overruling the DOJ. Anthony Blinken comes out and gives America the news. This is what this sounds like.
In the coming days, I expect to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov for the first time since the war began. I plan to raise an issue that's a top priority for us: the release of Americans Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner, who've been wrongfully detained and must be allowed to come home. We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release. Our governments have communicated repeatedly and directly on that proposal. And I'll use the conversation to follow up personally and, I hope, move us toward a resolution.
Okay, so very generic, not a lot of specifics there. We have a little bit more saying that I don't have specifics. A reporter asks him a question about this because Brittney's been there since February, which is the second month.
When you talk about the substantial proposal, can you, I realize you won't get into the specific details of it, but does it involve a swap along the lines of what was done for Trevor?
Because I want to make sure that the proposal that we put forward has a good chance to advance. I'm just not going to get into it in public.
Okay, so not a lot of details there, but you can see it feels like the wheels are in motion. There is a prisoner exchange that seems like it is underway. Viktor Bout, the merchant of death, in exchange for Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan, 2 Americans who hopefully are coming home. The question will be, what are the consequences of that exchange? Does Viktor Bout just suddenly run off and rejoin his old buddies, his old arms dealer book club? Who knows? We'll have to see. We'll, of course, continue to follow that story and others. We hope you join us. All right. And then our last story of the day is the transgender lunch money lawsuit, which, as I said, I think has just perfect alliteration. We'll see how that lands. Maybe not. Transgender lunch money lawsuit. A bunch of states are now suing the Biden administration, the federal government, because they are saying they are trying to impose upon them gender identity and sexual orientation policies that they don't want in their local schools. As you can see here, it is the case of Tennessee versus Biden. It's really Tennessee versus the Department of Agriculture, which is the entity that doles out money for schools. And today we've got a lot to unpack. It's going to start off with learning where this lawsuit is originating from, and it comes from Tennessee. Tennessee Attorney General, his name is Herbert Slatery #2. We'll see what he has to share with us about his background, but also take a look. We've got the announcement of the lawsuit, which was just yesterday on July 26, and this is a follow-up to a June 22nd letter, a June 2022 letter that details why this is so necessary. So we'll get some background there before we actually jump into the criminal. This is a civil complaint that is about 137 pages. We'll hit the highlights of that, and then we'll leave it there. Now, as I mentioned, Herbert H. Slatery, he's over from Tennessee. And on this channel, we've talked a lot about the idea of sort of federalism and that we've got a growing battle between the U.S. federal government and various states. And there's states pushing back. They don't want to be the subject of the federal government when they are not functioning appropriately. And Herbert Slatery is here, and he says he was appointed by the Supreme Court there to serve an 8-year term. He's the chief legal officer of the state. He investigates and prosecutes civil actions for all sorts of claims against the U.S. government. He led a nationwide investigation into opioids and the Purdue Pharma, defended laws against violations that he said were taking place under the EPA, and so on. So that's who we're talking about. Now, back in June of this year, what happened was he got together with a whole slew of other individuals. We can see their names down here from a bunch of different states, and they all signed this letter. We've got Leslie from Arkansas, Marshall from Alabama, Taylor from Alaska, Florida, Carr, Brnovich from Arizona. Okay, all of these different attorneys general sign on to this. Shout out to Kansas, Indiana, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, Montana, and others. Right? Utah, all signed off on this thing, and they sent it over. CC'd the House, CC'd Chuck Schumer, CC'd Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, and the others. And they're responding to a change in what the Biden administration has done. This letter came back from June 14th. They say, "Dear Mr. President, the USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture, the FDA, enforces these rules." And they just came back out on May 5th, right? And they imposed this new policy, a program of discrimination. The guidance states that it's to provide state agencies with operations and different instructions about, here it is, you see this right here, gender identity and sexual orientations. And it's only applying to programs that receive federal aid. So one of the themes, one of the theories that we've talked about when we have these federalism battles, the federal government versus the state government, is how does the government make the states comply? What is the enforcement modality, the enforcement mechanism? Oftentimes, it's the power of the purse because there's a limited set of things the federal government can do. Everything else is reserved to the states. So what they'll do is they'll say that if you want this federal money, you've got to do what we say. Raise the drinking age, raise the speed limit, do what we say, we'll give you this money. And as state citizens, we still have to pay federal taxes, whether they give that back to us or not. Like, we're paying for it, and they demand that you comply with their rules if you want a little bit of that money back. It's a very disgusting system, but it's what we've got. Here, it says, by vastly expanding the concept of discrimination on the basis of sex, they're changing a definition via fiat through executive order in the Biden people team. They're including now gender identity and orientation. It imposes, they write, unlawful regulatory measures on state agencies. The inevitable result is going to be chaos. And so as the chief legal officers of our state, we have to explain to you why this guidance is unlawful and why we ask you to withdraw it. Number one, this was issued without our consultation. There's something called the Administrative Procedures Act that says that, you sort of have this reliance right. The schools relied on this money. Now the government is changing the rules. They're relying on the federal government not changing the rules. So their reliance right is being impacted. And this is saying you can't do that unless you go through the rules, and they have not been doing that. The guidance must be withdrawn because it was not issued in compliance with the APA, but that's done intentionally. They say the USDA has tried to circumvent the requirements because they know that they couldn't do it otherwise. Same pattern that we've seen with the CDC and other federal agencies. They know that if they go through the APA, because there's all these notice and comment periods and requirements in order to get stuff passed, they just don't do it. It's exactly what the CDC did when they made it illegal to throw people off of your property when they weren't paying their bills. We have long had a productive relationship with the federal government, says this attorney general. We'd like to continue this way, but the guidance flouts the rule of law and also relies on illegal analysis and bad guidance. Therefore, please address it. You just passed this new rule. We're asking you to revoke it. Please do that. Now, obviously, that is not going to happen. So yesterday, on July 26th, they made this announcement. This came over from Slatery's office, and it says, AG Slatery, after that letter went out and Biden people told him to basically get bent, they said, all right, fine, we're just going to sue you, okay? And here's what the lawsuit looks like. Attorney General out of Nashville, he's leading a 22-state coalition now. The lawsuit is seeking to stop the Biden administration from enforcing an expansive and unlawful interpretation of anti-discrimination laws under the threat of withdrawing key food assistance program funding. So it's the power of the purse. Follow our gender identity guidelines or lose your lunch money. In the complaint, multi-state coalition challenges new regulations imposed by the USDA, and we'll go through and take a look at the complaint along with some of the exhibits here. This was filed, as we can see, out of the United States District Court out of Tennessee, Knoxville Division. And take a look at all these different states you can see here. Kentucky, Missouri, Louisiana, everybody, right? 22, I think, are on this list. And then I think, is Utah on here? Yeah, Utah's on there too. So I think it's a total of 23 now. And this is a complaint for injunctive and declaratory relief. Let's go through it just a little bit. We'll hit the intro and then we'll wrap it up. Introduction says, President Biden directed federal agencies to rewrite federal law. And this is to prevent discrimination on the basis of gender identity and orientation. The USDA did this by ignoring procedural requirements, directives, and rules that make this difficult on us, the states. You just change your rules. You just take your pen out and mark your documents differently. We all have to live with it. And they write in their lawsuit, first, the department issued a memo updating the nutrition services complaint policy to include claims of discrimination. This is a new requirement. And it also is a flawed understanding of what actually constitutes discrimination. Attached to the memorandum was a questions and answers document saying that they're updating their procedures and that they provided additional guidance a short time later. But the department compounded errors, and collectively what they have done through all of these different changes, what they're explaining is happening here. It's like, you pass a law, and then what you do is you create a brochure that explains the law. And so what they did is they didn't change the actual law, because that's a lot of work. What they did is they just changed the brochure. And the brochure sort of interprets the law differently. We can do this a little bit differently. And now they're passing out the brochures. And they're saying to the schools, this is what we do now. If you don't do what we do now, according to this brochure, well, then you're in violation of the law. And therefore, we're going to take our lunch money away from you. And what they said is they changed all these brochures. They changed all these manuals. They changed all these guidance things. And they say, look, collectively, the memoranda and the final rules, they inappropriately expand the law far beyond what the statutory text, the requirements, and the precedent and the Constitution allows. You are not allowed to do that, is what they're saying. You can't just sort of give us this updated pamphlet and expect us to change everything. The department claims the interpretations are required by the decision, but that was a narrow decision, and you're misinterpreting this. The department memoranda concern highly controversial and local issues of enormous importance to the states in addition to this, right? Not only which would tell you how to legitimately update these rules and your brochures, but you're usurping these issues away from the states, their subdivisions, and their citizens. The department has no power to settle these issues, let alone by executive fiat without providing any opportunity for public comment. You don't just get to change the rules. Plaintiffs here, Arizona, Tennessee, Indiana, many other states, shout out to all of you, are suing to prevent the department from usurping authority that properly belongs to Congress, the states, and the people, and to eliminate the nationwide confusion and the upheaval that the department guidance has inflicted on states and entities. Now, to be clear, right, these AGs, they're saying, look, we are not denying benefits based on somebody's orientation or identity. We're not doing that. But we are saying that this is an unlawful and unnecessary. It imposes new obligations upon us, along with new liabilities. And this is going too far. And pay attention to this last line here. This can be stretched. They're saying their concern is this gets stretched all the way out to ending sex-separated living facilities, right? So gendered, biological sexed living facilities. Get rid of them. Athletics. Those are discriminatory based on gender. So do athletics now go away, or else the feds take away your lunch money? And mandating the use of biologically inaccurate preferred pronouns, right? That's all discriminatory. What if somebody mispronounced somebody? And part of the new change says that you have to investigate these things if you want that lunch money. Here, significant amount of money. We're talking about $28 billion in funding for SNAP benefits. $28 billion in lunch money. Those benefits were distributed to 15 million people all across the various states. And that's why they're filing a lawsuit, saying that this is all taking place outside of the proper right. Look at this. This is 137 pages, so I'm not going to bore you with all of this legalese. But here, let's just take a look and see if we can see any big chunks. Yeah, it's mostly, these lawsuits are pretty bland and boring. We have all sorts of exhibits down here. Here is a federal share of the certification costs of the different billions of dollars, household dollars that are in there. All right, so they're making their case that the government just can't take this right away from them. And we'll see where this ultimately goes. Now, the Biden people are going to be responding to the lawsuit, of course. They're going to probably make many of the same arguments that we saw in many of the CDC cases where they say, no, we have sort of plenary power. We can go do these things. And oftentimes these lawsuits have to go up to a district court, and a federal judge has to say, you stepped over the bounds. You stepped outside of your hula hoops, and it's not appropriate for you to just sort of make substantive changes to the law when you don't have the authority to do so. And so we will continue to cover that case. It's going to show up on the docket. I expect it to be something that is highly contentious because people care about their kids and their schools and their lunches. And so that, my friends, is it for the stories on the day. And let's take a look. We covered a lot of ground. Now it is going to be time to hear from you, to get your thoughts, your comments, and your brilliance on the program. And so let's turn in and tune in over to our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And let's see who's here first. JD Harlan says, kick it, to get us started. Shout out to JD. Kenny Cole says, well, Trump suing CNN is interesting. I wonder if he's doing it specifically to get his point of view that the election was corrupt as a semi-defense against Garland and the J6 committee assertions. It was obviously corrupt in many ways, but getting to discovery could be game-changing. Yeah, I'm going to look into that one. Trump is also suing Clinton, and I've got that one on my docket as well. But he's suing a lot, right? And CNN is another one in the crosshairs. We'll see where it goes. Good to see you, Kenny. TOS Forever says, Winder-filled Wednesday night, Rob, and watching the Watchers community. Winder-filled? Maybe Winder-filled? I'm not sure what that means, TOS, but shout out to TOS. Howard says, all I know is back when President Trump was in office, no matter what. I want Trump back no matter what, he says. The rest of them can all go to jail. Jason on Blast says, of course, we watch your entire program, says Jason on Blast. No, you don't. I could see it. I could see it in the analytics. A lot of people don't. A lot of people just watch 20 minutes, right? 20 minutes and they're out. Kincaid says, most people actually, is 22 minutes. Kincaid says, good evening, Rob. The shrub behind me is a rhododendron. I'm not going to remember that. I thought it was a gardenia. I think that's the only flower that I know, really. I have a question regarding all the cases flying around. Are there ways of requesting documents to be organized for ease of access? From the courts? No. That's a cute statement. Ease of access? No. No. I wish, man. I wish. Are you kidding me? Half my time is tracking down documents, it feels like. The UK apparently makes a point of highlighting troublesome clauses. Also, I was hoping Trump would have announced before they tried something, win or lose. Serious or not, it would have given him some protection. He might announce. I mean, like they're like fighting with each other right now. It's sort of this game of chicken. Like they're the two cars on the highway that are driving at each other, and they're going to see which one swerves first. We're going to see. It's going to be fun. But yeah, Kincaid, I think what your point is like ease of understanding, maybe. So ease of access. Yeah. Court documents are really difficult to get. Some of them I can't even get, right? It's really it's so convoluted. Most court systems are like 30 years behind technology. And I think lawyers kind of like it, right? It's job security for them. Here, former LEO says, so if there is a criminal prosecution, wouldn't former POTUS have all the protections afforded to all defendants? Yeah, but where are they going to indict him? DC? Was he going to get a DC judge and a DC jury? Okay, we'll see. So guess what? So what happens, right? He probably gets voted into office and he pardons himself, and you have a dramatic constitutional crisis. Like, I mean, it's game over, which will be a lot of fun. I can see Pelosi and the DOD subpoenas, plus about 100 others, including the J6 Inquisition and members and their staff. Their staff wouldn't have congressional protections. I mean, they would. They'd get all the same protections as any other defendant. But I mean, like what? Look at all the protections the J6ers have gotten. None. So why would they get any better? Kincaid says, the living tapestry that is us has always struggled with individual freedom and societal cohesion. Our country in the past carved out space for the individual underpinned by reason, faith, science, tradition, and tempered progression. The half-baked social movements as of late should be held to those standards. Attacking Title IX is a regression. Consider the scenario: Billy's parents notice his tendencies and they decide to alter biology to be perceived as traditionally normal. Wouldn't truly accepting progressive individuals be more concerned for society to have space and compassion for natural evolution? It's a good question there. from Kincaid. Yeah, it is interesting. And this sort of goes back to my comment yesterday about the fourth turning, and these generations have different understandings of justice and safety and how things should work and collectivism and individualism. And it's a conversation that's important. Thunder 7 says, can we swap Griner for Garland? Well, I don't think he'd be willing to make that trade. Griner hates the USA. Former LEO says, screw her, she made her bed. Probably, that might be true. I don't know. But she's still an American. We still got to go get her. We still have to. I'm sorry. That's the rule. Sorry. Miss Lucky says, if that Brittney gal is stupid enough to bring drugs into Russia, I don't have any sympathy for her. Eventually, Russia would cut her loose. It's true. The thug they want to trade should never get out. Yeah, that's sort of my point, It's a tough position because I don't like to leave a man or woman behind or any, person. But you do have to think about the consequences of releasing the merchant of death in the middle. Like, what are the Ukrainians going to say about this? Are they happy about that? They're like, oh, great. Is Brittney going to come and fight for us? Because the merchant of death is probably going to get all sorts of arms deals. Like, he's got to be like an MVP for the Russians. He's an arm dealer, right? Arms dealer. He's going to be moving arms. They're in the middle of a world war. Zach Nichols says, POTUS, we'll trade you one warmonger for one athlete. I have no words. On second note, can we toss around the idea of Mr. Robert Gouveia as a guest on Tim Pool's show? Yeah, Tim Pool. I'd love to go on Tim Pool's show. I'd love to, I don't know how any of that works, to be honest. I'm probably not ready for it yet. They probably want you to be a certain threshold. Like, they'd reach out if they wanted to, but they haven't. And I'm not expecting them to, nor should they. Why would they? They've got a huge show. And what would we talk about? Maybe the next time there's a criminal case to talk about, where are they located? Are they in DC? You have to fly out there, right? To fly to DC. That'd be a fun trip. Go to DC. Hopefully there's not another insurrection. Okay, Ed J is here. Says, first thing is Garland is a snake that came from the swamp. The same swamp the committee came from. As you may recall, he's determined that all parents who want to say in their children's educations are terrorists. If they manage to find anything true or more likely false, they will try to indict Trump. Would have long ago if they would have. As far as Griner goes, she really did a stupid thing. I'm sure the penalties are harsh in Russia, but what in the world made her think that you could violate the laws in Russia? Maybe it was stupidness here in the US. Why don't they prosecute anything? Maybe she has a big ego. Stupid either way. Okay, stupid, yeah. All the athletes and all the people who go abroad need to know the laws. The vast majority of them do. Now you have to give up a hardened espionage agent to save her. They say these woke lefties act... The way these woke lefties act, she probably won't say thank you. Don't know. I don't know if it's right or wrong. No, I don't want anything bad to happen to her. I think this is not a far off statement from mine, Ed. It's like frustrating, right? It's like, it's frustrating, but what do you do? What are you supposed to do? I don't know. Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob writes, the typical federal government blackmailing the states must have learned how to do that from J. Edgar Hoover, who truly was a threat to democracy. That's from Miss Lucky. Former LEO says, that's from Sergeant Bob. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover. That was that book, right? Didn't you recommend that book about Hoover? Former LEO says, we already know what Biden thinks of poor children. Let them starve if they can't learn the correct pronouns. I didn't see California suing to feed hungry poor kids. Thunder 7 says, Benny and the unselect corrupt Jets not happy right now. DJT just filed a lawsuit against CNN for derogatory statements and 2020 disinfo. Can't keep a good man down. And so is it like, did he actually file? Like, is there a complaint that was filed? I would love to see that. Okay, here they say has announced he is suing. My intent to file a lawsuit, threatens a lawsuit. Okay, so I want to see the actual lawsuit, right? But yeah, it'll be fun. We'll definitely cover it. TOS Forever says, here, is West Virginia joining The transgender for lunch case, I do not see it on our website. I don't know. Call your attorney general and tell him. It's Jake from Oxford. Here, it's Jake. It's from Oxford. He's the national security advisor. He comes by the show from time to time. Way smarter than us, okay? Like IQ, maybe 200. I don't know. But he went to Oxford. We didn't. So stop whatever you're doing, okay? You can't multitask when he speaks because it's too smart. Here he is. Let's see what he says. He says, hey, Rob, I hired a social media manager named Dave. The best idea I have ever had. He's like Siri, but I can actually hit him. He helps out so much, and he cuts my time in half on getting social media issues brought up to speed. You should consider doing the same. For example, here's what he brought me moments ago. Just for your knowledge, there were quite a bit of prisoners we proposed. Remember, there are Russian names, so I believe you're mispronouncing Viktor Bout. The correct pronunciation is Viktor Bout. A few other possibilities of Russian spies and terrorists we have considered. Okay, so Martha, last name Fokker, is on here. Marion, last name Money. Mark Z Spot is here. Master, last name Bates, is another spy. I don't know what this one is, and I don't want to say it. I don't know what's going. It's too smart for me, Jake. He says, again, this is for a female basketball player for a team no one ever heard of. I don't know what that Madka. I don't know what that one is, and that scares me. Somebody really got me on one of these early on in the show. Somebody had a name and they super chatted their name in there, and I said the name, and then the chat went wild, and I ended the show. I panicked. I said, uh-oh. I said a bad word, and I said, oh, and I panicked. I think I panicked. I might have just panicked in my head. I don't know if I actually ended it right there, but it was a bad situation. So yeah. Oh, mad cow disease. Oh, mad cow disease. Oh, oh, thank you, chat. All right, everybody help me out with that one. All right, it's Jake from Oxford. I told you, man. He's like riddles. He's like a mystery wrapped in a middle. He's an enigma. He is too stinking smart for me. All right, a few more. We did a quick refresh on this. Oh, we got some good comments here. Okay, some more. Let's see. A couple super chats came in. Curtis Bartle says, keep the mind fire going. Great reporting. Well, thank you, Curtis. I appreciate that. And the super chats are very useful. And I appreciate them. Thank you, Curtis. We are going to keep going. Elaine Smith says, you are ready for Tim Pool. He's in West Virginia. He is rambling lately. He needs someone new. Oh, all right. Well, look, it happens to all of us. Okay. We all get a little bit. I've noticed, right? I've noticed that we're missing some mods in the chat, and I know people come and go on the show, right? I've had enough of this guy for a while, and they're just done. And it's a weird profession to be in. It's a weird thing to do because the news is dynamic, and you're constantly trying to create and be at the front. So and Tim does a lot, man. He does a lot. So to be on all the time like that, and to have constant content coming out. He should be rambling. He's got to be talking. He's got a lot of time to fill, right? And be talking all day, just talking, rambling. I'll get there. I'll be there soon. If I'm not there already, it's not a big deal, all right. And so that was from Elaine Smith. Shout out to Elaine Smith. And thank you for your vote of confidence on that one. Captain Jim says, Rob, Griner got nabbed on 17 of 15 a week before Ukraine erupted. Oh, that's convenient. That makes sense, right? They needed her as leverage. Also, the Duber is pretty illegal in Russia, much more so than here. So she got herself into a real mess. Due process is pretty dead there, though. And it's been dead even before Ukraine. Now it's burned in the sun. And Biden had no leverage in negotiations with Russia, not since the 24th of Feb. Viktor Bout release is probably the only sort of thing they could offer. A very astute observation. Thank you, Captain Jim. Sounds like you really know what you're talking about, and I appreciate that here. Yeah, that makes sense. Here, another one from Miss Lucky. Sergeant Bob says, in all seriousness, I volunteered at an animal rescue nonprofit. Manager was homosexual. He did his job. Great leader. We're still friends. When with the PPB, which is the Portland Police, Worked with a sergeant who had a sex change operation. The new she was capable, easy to get along with. I told her once if I were, quote, the brass, I would choose her for my team. I can accept people that are different, but I highly resist the federal government or any entity or person shoving this all the way down my throat. Smart folks would just let matters involving the Fed stay the hell out of it. Yeah, I agree with that one, Sergeant Bob. Totally. Right? Look, I think a lot of people feel that way. And they don't care. They want to shove it down your throat because not enough people do, I guess. Here, Radice says, I take offense to your statement about watching your show. I don't sit through the whole thing. I listen while doing things. I go from YouTube to locals. Yes, I log out of the streams as I move about my business. That's good. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I didn't mean offense. Like, if you don't watch the whole show, it's not like, get out of here. That's not my position. If you don't stay till the very last minute, just don't even come back. What's the point? No, I don't care, right? I prefer you stay and watch the whole thing. It's better that we connect. But what I'm trying to do is just create, these shows, we cram a lot in here and a lot of people just can't come back to it. And so if I sort of silo these segments off today a little bit, like today I did a pretty terrible job at it, but you silo them off a little bit and then those can be their own independent videos and people can come back and watch those. Jeremy says, I know some states bend over when the feds use extortion to make them follow their demands. I also realize it may not be by the lawsuit brought up by the group of states. Question, is it legal for the federal government to use extortion against the states? Well, they don't call it extortion, but I mean, that's kind of what this is, right? Do what we say or else. So it's the power of the purse, right? It's not, yeah, it's legal. It's similar to extortion. Extortion is when it's illegitimate. Here, it's legitimate because our laws say so. Good to see you, Jeremy. Thunder7 says, Rob, are you planning on give Alex Jones some legal analysis? Would love your take. It's another Bannon trial where he can't present evidence and have cross-examination. I don't even care what he said. Isn't that protected under the 1A? So I think, I'd be open to covering Alex Jones and what's going on there, but I don't know that there's much to cover or much to go on. Like, it's just about damages at this point, right? The judge has already found him liable for the defamation. So it's now just about how much money he owes. So it's like he's already it's almost like sentencing. How much time do you get, right? The main trial is already over. It's just about damages. I guess that could be something interesting there. So I'll have to look there. Sorry, spelling on a phone is challenging. Wonder-filled night from TOS. Former LEO says, look what happened when they emptied the prisons in Afghanistan. Of course, we would never learn from our mistakes. Jason on Blast says, I watch you on YouTube because the app is on my TV, but I chat in locals. Which is very cool. Thank you, Jason on Blast. Yeah, I'm learning how people are, using things and how to develop these various communities. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob say, we visited Oxford a few years ago, and I did not feel I became smarter. Oh. Well, how long did you sit in the room? I think you have to sit in the Oxford, you have to sit there for like a year or a couple of years. If you sit there for a couple of years, then it matters. You probably didn't sit there long enough. It's sort of like sitting in a pool until your hands become pruny. It wasn't long enough. Kincaid says, regarding videos and such, is there a way to real-time set chapter for later? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, Kincaid, so I could be wrong about that. Oil Smoke Jones is here, says, confuse, corrupt, and mutilate your children or else. Why am I not surprised? Yeah, and you can't even use certain language about that anymore. Oil Smoke, it's going to be interesting to see how parents respond. We were speculating about this on our morning walk and talk, saying that, people and voters get very animated when their kids are at stake. And this is a situation where that could be one of the most important issues of the election season. We'll see. And our last one came in from Lava Java Lava, who is also modding down the fort for us. Thank you, Lava, for your generous super chat. And you're chatting away in there, just salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker, because of all the salt. And we know that it is often quite salty here around these parts. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day, it looks like. And I want to thank everybody who is a part of our communities who really makes these live streams possible and happen. If you'd love to join us, we're over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. JC the Music Man is here, Texas Ditch Doctor, John McGarvey, Kincaid, Zach Nichols, and many others are chatting away. Now we have morning walk and talks where we have a 20-30 minute video that I post about six times a week, really. And, come join us and sort of join in on the conversation. You still get those videos if you press that join button on YouTube, which is right next to the subscribe button. I'd appreciate it if you think about our law firm. If you happen to run across, if you're just out there having lunch with friends or family, and somebody says, oh, you're not going to believe what happened to me. I got a traffic ticket. Oh, my son got in trouble with this gal. Something happened to my buddy when he was out in Old Town, right? That's what we do. We help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. And we'd love the opportunity to earn a referral from you, earn your business, and really deliver a home run for your friend, family member, somebody that you love, or you, unfortunately, if it is you. 480-787-0394. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona. Free case evaluations. Come into the office. Get a copy of my book. It's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. And we'll do what we can to help you. We're very passionate about the work that we do, and we appreciate your referrals to us. Shout out to the mods in the house who are modding down the fort. I see Vientikis is here playing hookies in the house, along with Lava Java Lava. Vientikis, is he back from vacation? Just Cows. I think I saw Lean. There's Lean. Lava Java. We've got the whole crew in here. Shout out to everybody. All in the house, helping to mod down the chat, and I really am grateful for you. We have our Spotlight supporters, QSimple.com, Chris Romero, David B3, and Dr. EMB in the house. They all support the show at that Spotlight level on YouTube, or the equivalent amount on Locals, which means we can share some of that very nice screen real estate at the end of the show. So please support them. Thank you to each of them for your support. And now that, my friends, is officially it for the day. We will be back here tomorrow to do it all again. I hope you have an amazing night. You sleep very well. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.